So transcendence is the other path, right? Mating sounds so 21st century. I'm looking at some of the winds, some of the directions the winds are blowing, and I think what's going to happen over the next many decades or at most a century is that many humans, not the majority, nowhere close to it, I don't think so, but many people are going to transcend the desire for love, for mating, for companionship, for sex, for emotional affirmation and validation. They're going to transcend the need for they're going to transcend these basal emotions that people have been feeling, humans have been feeling for the longest time. And while on first glance this might sound shocking, we actually do have a precedent of something like this having happened in the past. It's actually happening right now as I speak. We had People used to have a ton of kids back in the day, and I mean a literal ton. If you look at the median family in any country like 100 years back, they probably had like 10, 15 kids. So if you take let's say 15 kids on average, and then let's say half of them survive into adulthood, let's say each of them weighs 150 pounds, if you use that system, then you've got a literal ton of kids, right? So you've gone from having a literal ton of kids just 100 years back to many countries probably at the risk of being wiped off the face of the map within 3 to 4 generations, right? With South Korea, they're going to lose 90% of the population in 2 generations, and 98 in 4 generations, right? Which is roughly 100 years. So we've actually seen these kinds of paradigm shifts before. These kinds of you do have the precedent for something as remarkable as this happening. And humans transcending the need for companionship and sex and mating and yeah, related things would be probably even a greater, because it has shaped and determined so much of our civilization's trajectory. And for many people, their lives have been shaped by those impulses to a large degree, right? If you listen to Freud, for example, he would say that everything that you do comes from that, stems from that. That's absolute bollocks, but there's it can't be denied that that is a for some people obviously plays a more significant role. For some people, it plays minimal to zero to role, but it does play a role in most people's lives to some degree. So okay, so I made this absolutely outrageous statement. What are the trends which I believe are going to take us in that direction? For a lot of people, people are becoming more meditative, right? Because they've got the luxury to. Funnily enough, we used to be humans as a species probably had the highest number of meditators back in the, I don't know, the Chinese and the Indians. A ton of people wouldn't have a ton of things to do, so a lot of people would choose that path of life, right? That you just spend time reflecting, you just spend time contemplating on the nature of reality without any tools, without anything like the Greeks used to, but you just spend time thinking about your mind, right? And then you come upon these insights that can become the foundation of nirvana, right? And I think we're going to kind of revert to that in a way, because many people will experience the kinds of pleasures, 1,000 times the kinds of pleasures and delights that Siddhartha experienced in, oh, year was it? I should know this. I should know this. Well, year 563 BC, right? That is 2,600 years ago. Now we can experience things which are completely unimaginable to someone living in that time, right? And we are going to experience these pleasures and these delights, which are, and once they spend time doing this, and there'll be a subset of people who won't necessarily need to go through that path, but who will bypass that path by just being the wired in a way that they want to engage in more deep thought, they want to engage in more understanding of the mind, right? They just want to soak in the beauty of the consciousness, right? Because I'll glimpse those moments when I sit with myself meditating. I feel this sense that I don't need anything else in life. Like this moment, right here, right now, everything's perfect. But then as soon as I'm out of it, I'm like, I want so much out of life, right? Like so much. But when I'm sitting in that moment, and I know that I can very much make the conscious choice of making that state, that glimpse of nirvana, that glimpse of enlightenment, become the status, become the default for my waking consciousness, right? For my awake consciousness. But I don't want to make that because I've got things I want to do in this world. I've got certain goals I need to, certain missions that I'm called for, that I need to fight for. But my point is that there are many people who deeply enjoy meditation, right? Who enjoy being in the mind, who enjoy consciousness. If in the world of 2070, when you don't have distractions of having to make money to make your living, having to make your living basically, you don't have distractions of the admin tasks, the maintenance tasks, because your AGI companion takes care of everything. You're probably going to arrive at these conclusions far earlier in life than you would have. Then there'll be other people who will come to the same conclusion through either relationship dissatisfaction or dissolution. There'll be people who will be coming to this path through having experienced everything and realizing that true joy, true meaning lies in mind awareness and service rather than sensory pleasures. And to a large degree, even relationships are sensory pleasures. Not just the physical part of it, but even the emotional, right? The reason that emotionally relationships seem to be so alluring is that you've got this person who affirms you, who validates your existence, who supports you emotionally because you're not self-sufficient enough, right? But our AGI companions could help us, coach us to a path, to a point where we realize that we have all we need, right? Or we can develop all that we need. Now that's a conclusion that I'm getting to. I'm pretty much there. But that is a conclusion that our AGI, again, the reason that I said that this is an AGI-led solution, all these three solutions I mentioned, they are very much contingent on AGI, is because even in this scenario, right, your AGI is helping you come to these insights, come to these conclusions yourself. It's going to walk you very gently, just in the way that you would want to be walked subconsciously, because it knows you inside out, right? So if it knows that it's probably best for you to get to this point, it can create it can design the perfect path for you to get from point A, which is where you are, you miserable sack, to point B, which is where you realize that, oh, you have all you need. Everything else, those desires of wanting to have a person to complete you, wanting to have these things in life, all of that, those are either a result of societal conditioning or biological conditioning. They're illusions, basically, right? Now, a large number of people will walk on these Buddhist paths. Interestingly, I remember reading this sci-fi book. I don't remember the name of it because I loved the book, so I'm surprised I didn't remember the name of it. But it was talking about the different paths that many future civilizations could take once they've figured out, faster light travel, once they've done solve the basic problems, right? That once they've created population equilibriums, even in growth equilibriums, not just, stable equilibriums, but once they've done everything that a civilization is expected to do on its trajectory, what does it do? And one path that I found in this book, which I found to be very, again, this is obviously a very anthropocentric view, but I think this is something which probably many intelligent civilizations would converge at, this Buddhist realization, right? For example, if you're an alien species that is super powerful, you are going to conquer galaxies, you're going to conquer solar systems, you're going to conquer many alien species, right? But at some point, again, it's not an inevitability, but if evolution works the way we think it does for every species, or not even evolution, but there's a good chance that species probably at some point in their growth trajectory, they're going to come to the conclusion that they don't really need the stuff that they thought that they needed. Another possible parallel path to this is the civilization which realized that, okay, we don't need a ton of people, we don't need anything, we're just happy the way we are, but all we care about is solving the fundamental problems of the universe, right? Or having a fundamental understanding of the universe. And now there were only a few things which are left unsolved, and they wanted to solve that. So what they did was, this one is from vacuum diagrams. What this species did was to basically create the structure, this conscious structure with consciousness that just observes the universe, because they wanted to observe maybe the rate of falling of the background temperature, which is connected to something a lot more complex. and they want to observe that, but they also didn't want to expend any more energy. So they designed the least energy state possible of their own being. So remove, for example, remove all the things that in you that are consuming a lot of energy without serving that one objective function. They design that, and then they would dissolve into the ether, into the metaphorical ether, over a span of millenniums, over a span of eons. But all they cared about was finding the answer to that. That was the only thing, right? So at some point, humans will realize that all the things that we chase, the greed, the lust, the temptation, even the things like hatred, all of these things are things that humans will at some point transcend beyond, right? And I see an increasing number of people transcending beyond wanting to engage in relationships, because they will now have, first of all, more free time, right? They'll have this AGI which will take care of all the work, all the admin and maintenance. They'll have this AGI which can design the perfect path and walk, like imagine having your own Buddha. I think this is a perfect example, right? This is a perfect way to put it. Imagine having your own personal Buddha to guide you on your own journey to the happiest mind, the happiest mental state, and helping you be there for more and more time until that becomes your permanent place of residence, right? I think in our AGIs, for many people will choose that as a default objective function, and they'll go down that path. And there'll be people who will come to this path because they'll see that for an increasing number of people, they don't find the juice from human relationships with all the messiness, the drama, the conflicts, the baggages, the sacrifices, the requirements, the giving up of self-identity and shrinking of personal space. They don't find all of that worth the squeeze, right? And so they'll experience relationships and they'll realize that, okay, even the ones which are really good really wasn't worth it. So you know what? Let me just become completely self-sufficient, right? And this is kind of, how I think about it. Part of me wants a great relationship, but I'm also never going to settle. And I also know the odds of me finding a great relationship, the kind of partner that I can build a great relationship with, are so tiny that I shouldn't waste any mental bandwidth in hoping for that particular outcome. So, the rational part of me crunches the numbers. It comes to the conclusion that there are like 2 to 3 women on the entire planet who I would want to. And I'm not saying that they're people I know. I'm just saying that if I crunch the odds. So, for example, the straight one that I want in people, that straight one is present only in, let's say, 10% of people. Then there's straight 2 that's present in 10% of people, 5%. Straight 3, 10%. Straight 4, 1%. Straight 5, right? There are these lists of traits that I want in this person. But again, all of these are not overlapping. And when I crunched numbers, as I did, back of the envelope, mind you, because otherwise it would get really messy. And so the number I came to was 2 to 3, right? Which is to say that I'd have to get really lucky. I'll believe in luck. And also, I'll prepare in a way, when I think of my ideal state, my ideal self, my ideal mind, I want to be completely self-sufficient. I don't want anything external to satiate any emotional void, any emotional want in me, right? I don't want there to be any wants in the first place. Like when I want to do the things I want to do, I want to do them from a sense of duty rather than from a sense of wanting to or needing to do them to solve my ego, right? So I'm very much already equipped to be on this path, which is where I'll have this perfect Buddha teaching me, guiding me along the path of becoming completely self-sufficient, which I kind of am in a lot of ways, but also I'm not, in the sense that while I don't need someone right now, I'm also not happy with myself, right? So self-sufficiency doesn't just mean that you can be without any human companionship. It also means that you can be your best person without any human companionship. So I'm not there yet, obviously, tragically, but I know I'm going to get there in the next 5, 10, obviously it's like a lifelong journey, but I'm going to cross the most important threshold in the next 2 to 5 years, right? But yeah, that was my point. Imagine I want to transcend companionship, the desire for intimacy, the desire, or there'll be many people who will also will feel the same way. Desire for needing validation, for needing affirmation, right? For needing sensory pleasures, and yeah. Imagine a self-actualized, self-mastered, super smart, or even decently smart human. They probably don't need to have human companionship. Probably have everything that they need to have. And this is why I take the issue with this dependence, independence, and interdependence hierarchy and model that I've seen being espoused in many places, which says that dependence is the lowest state, then you got independence, which is the intermediate state, and the state to aspire towards, the state that you want to work towards, is the interdependence, right? Now, at a societal level, I can see that this is fine, right? I can see that this is, for the majority, this is perfectly fine. But I don't think that, and again, I think that is necessarily true for every single person on the planet. There's probably a tiny proportion of people for whom independence is the highest value. Having said that, I also agree with the sentiment: it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. Right. A huge part of the human experience is loving someone deeply on all these different dimensions. What about the people who choose to forgo this path and who become Buddha incarnates in a way without experiencing any of that, right? Now that leaves something on the plate. Now a lot of these people won't, like, they'll have transcended the FOMO, they'll have transcended the desire to want to engage in all these disparate states of mind, right? Inhabit all these possible states of mind. For me, I still haven't, and probably I will at some point, but yeah, it remains to be seen how I'm going to deal with that particular question, grapple with that particular question. Yeah, so again, to get more granular with me, I'd be perfectly happy by myself. I would be equally ecstatic finding someone I can truly love, who I feel is deserving of my love, and vice versa, right? That I'm deserving of her love. But if I don't, I'll have an equally full and rich life, but that richness of that life would be different from the fullness and richness of that life would be different from the fullness of richness of the counterfactual, where I do end up finding that person, right? I do end up building that relationship, and it'll be different because in the scenario where I end up not finding that person, I end up becoming self-sufficient. Even in the second scenario, I'll end up becoming self-sufficient, but I end up choosing the path of the lone warrior, the lone wolf, which appeals to me massively. I want to experience a lot of the things, and so there'll be parts of my brain which won't be activated, to put it that way. And yeah, so kind of that would leave something on the table, but I'm perfectly fine with that. Now, when I laid out these scenarios, but you tend to generalize that humans are going to go in this direction or humans are going to go in this direction. The way I see it, there'll be a ton of humans who will go in this direction, a ton of humans who will go in this direction, some of humans will choose a path of, building the perfect relationship with the perfect AGI. There'll be a ton of people who will transcend human relationships. There'll be a ton of people who will build the best human relationships. And there'll be a ton of people who will probably keep on making. I mean, if you've got an AGI, why would you keep on making the same mistakes and repeating the same relationship patterns? I don't see how someone would, because the AGI's job would be to help them break out of those self-sabotaging loops. Yeah. But then there are people who are more physically embodied among us, people who like sports, who are more physically embodied, right? Dancing, stuff, etc. For them, relationships will be more and more, human relationships will be the main thing, while there are people among us who are more mind-oriented. And for them, these two paths will actually become more of the norm. Now, I want to wrap everything up. I want to talk about my initial feelings when I was writing this piece and thinking about this and doing my research. I felt a tinge and a touch of sadness almost, to the degree that I can feel sadness about something inevitable, and to the degree that I would feel sad about something outside of my own locus. I felt sad about it because human relationships, they are the best thing about life at this moment, right? The best human relationships. Now, it's a pity that most people don't get to experience the best of them. For many people, they become the source of the greatest pain. But still, at the very best, they can be the very best of the human experience, right? And it kind of saddens me to think that they're going to fade away from being the default state into something which is going to go from optional to something that only the minority of the population choose to go down, right? Go down the path of. But I also want to say that these are not the futures that Elinity has in mind through what I'm building and what I'm working on. The force kind of seems dystopian on one level, though it won't for too long once we become less speciesist, which is that once we realize that, we are going to interact with aliens, we are going to interact with AGIs, right, which are going to be like alien minds, and especially if you build minds from scratch, they're going to have a completely different architecture. In the longer arc of history, say in the year of the Lord 3000 AD, we might have half of the couples being from across the two major intelligent life forms, humans and cybernetic minds, right? I think that might become the default, just because of how perfect those relationships could be, as in how frictionless those relationships could be. And probably a quarter of relationships might be human, and then a quarter of people might have gone down the Buddhist path. From this perspective, I cannot harbor too much pessimism about this, because one, it's inevitable. Second, it will lead to a decrease in pain and suffering, and an increase in joy, increase in actualizing yourself in all the different dimensions that you want to actualize yourself, right? But what I do want to do through Elinity is partially push this future more into the future by having human partners become more enticing, by having human relationships be seen as the most rewarding and meaningful and fulfilling. But I know I'll be fighting against the inevitable in the longer term. And obviously, I'll be doing my bit to also make the inevitable work for humans, right? But until then, the goal is to help people build the best relationships by having each one elevate themselves into a partner worth being in a relationship for and with. That is the goal of Elinity, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next conversation. And so as relationships become more functional, more utilitarian, more transactional, explicitly more about the pleasure, physical pleasure, the emotional companionship, and intellectual stimulation part of things, over being the norm that everyone engages in just because it is how things have been done, you should start seeing more of these kinds of dynamics crop up. As relationships become less romantic relationships, intimate relationships become less about having kids, about raising a family, then arguably your best AGI in the year 2040 is going to be a better parent than 95% of people, right? So as relationships become less about that, again, you're going to see more of these dynamics become prominent. Again, just to reiterate, these are not my prescriptions, these are my predictions, my expectations of the inevitability of some of these meta trends, and my observations and heuristics of the human mind and human society, and incorporating a model of where things are heading. These are not what I hope to see. On some level, they sadden me, on the level that they could sadden me. But again, what I'm building LNG to be is a counterforce or the pro-force, aimed explicitly at helping people build the best human relationships with the aid of AGI, rather than the AGI replacing some of these core fundamentals of the human experience. I think that is pretty much it for the time being. Thanks for the time. I'll see you soon. Cheers.